All right, I think I'll go ahead and get started. As I'm making my announcement, please just go ahead and keep letting us know in the chat where you're coming from tonight. So hello again, my name is Shakira Maki. I'm a staff member with the NASW New York State chapter. Before we begin, I just want to clarify that this town hall is not a continuing education program. We do have an anti-racist CE program series where we offer one free CE program focused on anti-racism every month. But again, tonight, this town hall is not a CE program. We will put a link in the chat to our CE programs if you're interested in registering for any of those. So just go ahead and check the chat and the links will be there. This is our 11th town hall in the Revolutionize Social Work. Revolutionize Social Work was created after a student member, Noshin Hoque, reached out to the chapter upset about the racism and white supremacy that she experienced and observed in social work, in school, and within the NASW. This is an example of the power that one person has. This movement has grown to a contact list of over 10,000 people. So I'm just gonna go ahead and mention a few items that have come up in past town halls, and there'll be some links in the chat to the things that I speak about. So our first Revolutionize Healing BIPOC only self-care and peer support program is happening a week from today on June 1st at 6 p.m. The registration link for that will be in the chat. And then our first Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander affinity group and peer support meeting will take place next Wednesday on June 2nd at 6 p.m. Again, registration link in the chat for that. And for those of you who are interested in contributing to the Revolutionize Social Work Action Group, you can go to the link that's in the chat for that as well. The leadership positions for that are open to BIPOC social workers only, and then social workers with white privilege are encouraged to be team members. All of the work that the Revolutionize Social Work team is currently doing is volunteered. So at the link that will be provided in the chat, you can donate to fund the revolution. These funds will go towards actions such as conference registration, travel for our leaders, and compensating our leaders for their time. So now I'll just quickly go over some rules of engagement and how we'll engage tonight on Zoom. So closed captioning is available for tonight. If it hasn't already turned on for you, you can click the CC icon at the bottom of the Zoom toolbar and it'll start the closed captioning for you. We do ask that you keep yourself muted unless you are sharing, and there are the reaction buttons you can click, and also the raise your hand buttons. Those are also at the bottom of the Zoom toolbar. So the purpose for tonight is to amplify and uplift BIPOC voices. So this means if you're a social worker with white privilege, you are invited to engage with everyone in the chat, use the reaction buttons, and actively listen to the town hall. But tonight you are asked not to speak, again, but just to listen. And our BIPOC social workers are invited to engage and lead the conversation tonight. If you would like to speak and reply to a prompt from our facilitators, we ask that you unmute yourself or raise your hand using the raise your hand function, and you will be called on. And I think that's the end of my announcement. So just thanks again for everyone joining us. And now I will turn it over to our facilitators.
Hi, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining. It's great to see familiar faces and new faces in this space with us tonight. My name is Afsha Malik. I am a Revolutionize team leader, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm going to pass it off to Noshin, our other facilitator for tonight.
Hi everyone, my name is Noshin. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am also a team leader for the Revolutionize Social Work Initiative. And thank you, Shakira, for opening up this space first. And before we start today, we just wanted to take a moment of silence for George Floyd and remember him today. Thank you, everyone. And before we start today, I just want to say not just George Floyd, but everyone, all the Black lives that have been lost to police brutality and racism. Let's still actively work to fight all these systems and oppressive structures, and remember them as well. And I'll pass it off to Sam to do her introductions too.
Good evening. My name is Sam Fletcher, and I am the Executive Director of the New York State Chapter of NASW. During this time, I always invite my son, Seth, to come and we talk a little bit about our Native heritage. For the first several revolutions, I didn't disclose that I was Native until the leadership team asked me to disclose, and they asked me to do that because we lead the chapter and the chapter operates through Native culture. So we always choose a different topic to talk about, but first I'm going to ask Seth to introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Seth. I am 20. I am Cheyenne Arapaho. My native name is Firewolf.
And I am Sam, his mom, and I am Cherokee, and I'm a member of the Bird Clan. And tonight we wanted to talk a little bit about mental health and Native culture, and the way that we view mental health struggles or mental illness. And also we want to give a shout out to Melodie because she put her tribe in the chat, and Seth was very excited to see that. So thank you, Melodie, for doing that. So in our culture, we view mental health struggles not as a negative thing. So there's not really a stigma attached to it. We just view it as people's brains work differently. So Seth's brother, my son, has bipolar with psychotic features, and he also has autism. So Seth has grown up with someone in the house who has, some mental health challenges his whole life. And we view it very much that you treat only symptoms that impact the person or if they impact the tribe. So the person really chooses what to treat. And Seth and I both have also struggled with depression and anxiety pretty much our whole lives at different points in time. And one thing that we talk about is that it's just part of your journey. And so even Seth's brother, his mental health challenges have been part of our journey as well. So that's just something that, that we all live with, we all talk about, and it's not really viewed as negative. We acknowledge that there's times it's very difficult to live with those mental health challenges. Like Seth, you would agree, there's times it's difficult and challenging, but it's not something that we view as negative, or it's not something we would even change. If we had the opportunity to change it, we wouldn't. It's just the way we exist. And then we always like to talk about the land. Sometimes you'll hear people do land acknowledgements. The reason they do land acknowledgements is to talk about the original caretakers of the land, the original Native tribes who were on the land. In our culture, we don't necessarily talk about land in terms of ownership. You can't really own the land. The land is for all of us, and our job is to be caregivers of the land and to treat the land with respect. To us, that you protect the land protects you, and you treat the land as such. I always say, if you give sovereignty back to the tribes, global warming will be solved in the United States because of our beliefs with the land and how you treat the land. Do you want to talk, Seth, about how the land is healing to you?
I find the land, to me, to be somewhat calming and relaxing to me. When I go outside, I just find it, I don't know, just peaceful to me. To be a safe spot when I like to go outside. It's just, to me, it's just peaceful. You could say that, yeah. So,
What's our favorite thing to do?
we like to go kayaking when we get the chance, when it's not freezing cold outside or it's raining, but we get the chance, me and my mom likes to go kayaking together. So
That's how we really connect, and we
Yeah.
really feel very close to our people when we're kayaking, and also with animals and everything.
Oh,
So
yeah.
we just ask that whose ever land that you're on today, that you think about the tribe that lived there, and that you treat the land as they treated the land, and you respect the land as they respected the land. And we're going to hand it back over to Noshin and Afsha, your wonderful facilitators tonight. Thank you. I'll say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sam, and thank you as well for the openness, the vulnerability. It's such a deep gratitude for everything you always teach us when you do come in and speak about your experience and your life values as well. And everyone in the comments saying being surrounded by nature is healing and the value from it, I have to agree as well. So today's town hall is really focusing on how do we as Black, Indigenous, and social workers of color disrupt racism in the environment we work in. So whether it's coworkers, our clients, our supervisors, all of that, how are we confronting racism? And I think it's something that's come up in almost every town hall as well. People have shared their experience on, like specific in their work environment, how it comes up. So we really want to dedicate this town hall to talking about it. And the first question that we want to ask any of our BIPOC social workers here today is to share, how do you confront a racist comment or a racist action or racism in general that comes from your coworker or supervisor? Because I think that's something a lot of us have to deal with, and we might not even know it.
Hi, I'll start.
Thank you, Don.
Sure. And so I've always been one, when something happens, I have to speak up about it. So it occurs, I need to take a time out for myself because internally I'm just exploding. Whether it's a derogatory statement, a joke made, I've had many instances in my life and as a social worker as well. And so for me, I take a time out, prepare for what I'm going to say, but I'm very direct and very firm. What you said insulted me. I'm offended by what you said. That should not have been said. So just being forceful, but I just really step back and gather myself because there's so much pain. And it's just not the pain of that moment. It's the pain of all the previous moments when this has happened. So it's not the first time that this has occurred. And so it's just a huge hill. And people don't understand, well, why are you getting so upset? I didn't mean to offend. Well, you're looking at me right here, right now. But I have miles and miles and miles of statements and comments and being followed in the store and the way people are treating me on a day-to-day basis. So it's just not your little comment that's upsetting me. This is part of me day to day. I can't even go and buy some daggone bread without being followed in the store. So your comment is not going to be diminished. And I just have to approach it. I mean, this has happened even with my bosses. And so one time something was going on and I just confronted it right away. And come to find out, my boss was lying about the situation that she said occurred. So I just believe you just have to confront it. And plus it just sits with you. Well, with me, it just sits. If I don't address what's going on, it just sits with me. And I'll wake up and then I'll just begin just thinking about it over and over and over again. And so I found for me to have peace, is to address the situation no matter how bad, but I just have to gather my thoughts and my plan of action. And so if I have to bring in two people, I've had to bring in two people and said, this is what I heard. Well, I didn't say that. I don't know who said, you know who said it. And just going through what happened, what was said, how inappropriate it was. And, you know, and sometimes, one time I was going to even call Office of Diversity and Inclusion. And so if you have to call HR or some or organization to get a department like that to get involved, get them involved. Because it's not fair for you to sit with this, for somebody to say something or do something that's against you time and time again. So it didn't happen one time. Usually this doesn't happen one time. It happens over and over again. And it's like, just stop the mess out. You have to address it. And people are usually surprised when you do address it and, oh, I'm sorry. You have to think before you speak. Because I'm not going to get hurt by what you're doing to me anymore. This is it. This is a wrap. All right, I'll shut up now.
No, Dawn, we always love when you come off mute and you speak and share your piece. And I just want to, you know, highlight what you've said. And, you know, thank you for sharing it. And a lot of times when Black, Indigenous, you know, people of color, social workers of color are, you know, faced with these racist, derogatory, micro, macro aggressions, you know, it's that constant denial that it's faced. Like, I didn't mean it. Like, why are you overreacting? But they don't understand. It's like this accumulation of constant aggressions that have been built up. And now it's like red. But in this moment, it's like, I still have to put myself together, you know, especially when we're in professional settings, and especially if this is our supervisor, or especially if we're like with a team of colleagues. So it just speaks to the constant burden. So thank you for sharing. I see Liz's hand is up. Liz, please come off mute.
Hi, I know the administration of the NASW NY New York State chapter has been really supportive of me in kind of what I've been dealing with, but I speak up mainly because I am being retaliated against by my former supervisor, who fired me for asking for protections around a client who was extremely racist in session, and then turned around and filed an allegation against my professional license, which I'm currently fighting, saying that I discriminated against clients. And so I am bringing this up because through this process, I've learned a lot of things. One, please have liability insurance, because even if you're like, at least my opinion is, even if your employer says they're providing it and you don't need to have it, if your employer is the one retaliating against you, you need to have protections in place to be able to get an attorney, have those fees covered, which I am having to do now. But also, I mean, I live in a one-party consent state when it comes to recording. And so I found that, you know, at my current job at a hospital, the other day, I had a doctor say to my face that he hates Indians and he hates women. And it was a long tirade and it was a joke, and and I'm the sensitive one, but I took it to HR. I documented it. I recorded the conversations with HR because I am learning that people will flip things on you. And so if you do live in a one-party consent state where you are allowed to record conversations without their consent, if you're part of that conversation, record those conversations. If it's required that you get consent, ask for that so that you can document everything. That's what I'm learning, is to document every single thing that happens. It's just, you know, I wish I had been told, like, these are the protections you need to have in place, because you know, I'm 1 year out of school and the clinical case manager, Renee Coleman. Crazy and wild, but I do worry for my colleagues of color and marginalized social workers, especially those who are coming right into the profession, because this is not what I thought. I mean, I guess I've always known that, you know, the violence of you know, certain groups of people against us is not new to me. The racism is not new to me, but this extent in this profession has come as a little bit of a surprise. But
Thank you so much, Liz. And I'm not surprised, but I'm sorry that that happened, and just it's not uncommon. And I'm sending you so much strength and like in solidarity with you, because it is really hard. The first step to even confrontation takes a lot. Trust me from experience. Like it's really hard to come to terms with it and take that first step to advocate. And I just wanted to pull in some common themes that I've just been seeing from what you've shared, Liz, and from Dawn said immediately, is like having witnesses and people to back you up. And then what you were saying, having that paper trail and that evidence, because we will get gaslit instantly. I mean, like, it's like this, the instinct is to like gaslight us and say it didn't happen. So for everyone here to know that, like, have that evidence, have that thing to back you up, because it's almost always going to be against us. So thank you so much for sharing, Liz. And Monica, I see you have your hands up as well, so I'll let you share.
First, thank you for asking that question about how do we address racism in the workplace with colleagues. The simple answer is you address it, you speak up, you say something. But the question is not, I guess, so much how do we address it? The question is, why don't we address it? Because it's the how and the response that makes being a person of color and a social worker so oppressive at times. Social work in and of itself is a very difficult profession. Yes, it is rewarding, but it is difficult because you're working with people who face a lot of challenges that come from systems of oppression, etc. But I would much rather deal with somebody who is having a psychotic break and trying to throw a chair at me than to have to explain to a white social worker what he or she just said was offensive. First, what they said is offensive. So I have a varying degree of being upset, an emotional response to it. I can't just respond to it. I have to gauge myself and select my words wisely to even approach this topic with the person. I mean, imagine a rape victim or a sexual harassment victim or any other victim of some type of offense having to gauge herself to explain why what this person did was hurtful. We would say, no, just speak your truth. But as a person of color, as a social worker, you can't do that when engaging with your white coworkers on the topic of racism, because racism is such an ugly, mean thing. Nobody wants that word used in a sentence with them as an adjective. So I already know I can't come out and say what you just said was racist, because there's a wall that's going up. They're not going to hear me. So first I got to figure out, how do I say this? So almost it's like, even though I'm the person that's been offended, I have to become this person's social worker and therapist in hopes that they'll even hear what I have to say. And then a lot of times it gets put back on me. You're being overly sensitive. I didn't mean it that way. You took it out of context, etc. I've had social break down and cry, like, really, you know, or the extreme. Well, I'm feeling attacked by what you're saying. Like, okay. It's just these defense mechanisms. So it's oppressive because, and I've said this before in these town hall meetings, racism was not created by people of color. And there's this definition that keeps evolving that's not being controlled by people of color. But there's this expectation when it happens that we step in and educate and fix it. And I guess my answer to the question is, how do we address racism in the workplace? I need for my coworkers who are listening, my colleagues who are white, to truly be allies and to speak up. If you're in the room and someone says something that's offensive, just because the person of color social worker didn't say something, it doesn't mean he or she wasn't offensive. They just don't have the energy to do it that day. You step in and do it. You step in and say something like what you just said was offensive or racist or what have you. We need you to step up and join this battle. It's the only way this is going to get addressed, because we've been addressing it for years and not much has changed. So I'm gonna get off my soapbox, but I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Monica. The chat is blowing up right now. Everyone is agreeing. Everyone is reiterating what you're saying. So thank you for sharing that. Taj?
Hi guys. So I just wanted to bring up my concern is what I've been experiencing being young and been working in like a human service setting since I was probably like 5 years now. So early on, I've been experiencing like this ageism and this type of policing around what is a professional look for me, how I wear my hair, how I shouldn't wear my hair, how I should wear my, common sense. Any professional knows what appropriateness is, but who is making this, who's writing the handbook on what is a professional look or appearance for BIPOC professionals, So that's my concern. I had a coworker one time, much older lady than I was, and I had my natural hair. She was like, I would never dare wear my hair like that. And I said, excuse me? She was like, yeah, I was just, like she had an experience at a job before, and they basically told her that her natural hair, the way it is grown out of her head, was not appropriate and not professional. So who is writing this code about our dress code or our appearance in this, in the field? Like, I'm just irritated with the policing around our appearance, that we're just naturally born this way. If I decided to straighten my hair or wear it curly, it should be entirely up to me. I don't think I should be addressed about that as far as dress code, or even like if my hair is a different color, like, a couple months ago, I had a different hair coloring and I was very subconscious, like, should I even do this? Does it even, would I be taken seriously? When, white people, they're brunettes and they wear their hair blonde all the time, but I have to think twice because I'm Black. So I don't know. That's my.
Thank you so much, Taj. And just like everything you said, so true. And like you calling out that professionalism is literally just a disguise for enforcing white supremacist values onto other people. The policing of hairs, I've been told what color hijab to wear is appropriate color, like how you should appear. It's their way of like putting their views on us, and a lot of people don't even recognize that it's racism. It's so, Taj, like everything you said, thank you so much for sharing, because it's so common in the work environment. And when I was starting my first internship in my BSW program, we had a whole hour dedicated to how do we appear professional in our internship so that they respect us. And that included make sure your hair color isn't a certain color, make sure you're wearing certain colors, things like that. And it's as if your looks are supposed to be worth your respect, and that should never be equated together. So thank you so much, Taj, for sharing.
Yep, I just want to repeat all of that. And I see, Don, you have your hand raised. And I just want to quickly say, like, I think we could even take it a step further, and it's like the policing of our appearance, but it's also the policing of our voice. And like you look at it from this ageism perspective, it's like, and you bring, you have white supervisors, and then you're also a young, person of color, Black or Indigenous, and you are there, on this hierarchy and under them. And it's like, okay, you want my opinion, you're open to my opinion, but the second I open my opinion and I say this is what we should do, then there's condensation, then there's like, no, I don't think that's a way we should go about it. And then it's like, it's that further gaslighting, and it's like perpetuates that inner imposter syndrome. Like, am I even set out for this work? Like, is this the right profession? So it's like they want us in the field, they want us to be a part of their work under their organizations, but it's like when I am involved and when I am active, then I'm also getting policed because of my involvement and how much I want to contribute. So it's this ongoing constant battle. And when you don't have that peer support, it's like, it's just like constantly burnt down. It's like a downfall from there. So thank you so much, Taj. Yeah.
I just want to add quickly, like, I've definitely had a struggle if I'm being like transparent, I've definitely had this struggle with trying to adjust my appearance or just my approach and almost everything to be taken professionally. I've done like, you know, a lot of charity work where I reached out to like other organizations, like in the city hall in the town that I live, and I'm always getting like this backlash. I like you're so it's like, okay, you're young, you're Black, like what are you doing? Like, you know what I'm saying? So I always try to show up, make sure I'm groomed well, just to be taken seriously. So I just feel like I have it hard being Black, being young, and then trying, and I just feel like that's where my struggle has been, where like, do I have to like change my entire identity to be more poised, to be more, fit, to be taken seriously? So that's what my struggle has been, like, being taken seriously as a young Black woman, like in this field. And then I just feel like that's why I'm so like pressed to want to like continue my education, get the credentials to add on. But like in reality, like the odds will be against, to me regardless. So it doesn't matter. Like, I think last town hall, someone mentioned like, we think that we get these titles and letters behind our names. And at the end of the day, we're still Black, and that's all they see before they even see our credentials. So yeah.
Thank you, Taj. Does anyone, a more experienced, preferably Black person in the room, and I know I want to call on you, Don, but let me just finish this question, have any advice for Taj in terms of, do you think she has to change her identity, to be taken seriously? How does she navigate around that? Yeah. Don, call on you now.
I think Don, you can go. I didn't hear the end of Afsha's thing, but Don, I think you had your hands up, so you can go.
Just really quickly, I just wanted to let, for those who don't know, that Cuomo signed a law in regard to hair, that you can't be discriminated against for your hair that you wear to work. And I actually did a little workshop on this, and that's what I was trying to find. And of course, it's leaving now, but if you just look up hair discrimination, Governor Cuomo, there's been a few other states that have followed suit. California was the first state that actually had a hair discrimination ban. So people cannot talk about your hair or say anything regarding your hair on the job. So know what that number is. Know what it says in that law. So if anyone says anything to you, they're breaking the law. That's why I just wanted to say, because a lot of people don't know that that ban actually exists.
Thank you. And Andrea had just shared that's called the Crown Act.
Yes,
thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. And thank you for letting us know, Don. And I'm also wondering, when interviewing for jobs, how you'd be able to identify if the interviewer is discriminating you based on your hair, your outward appearance too. Because it's hard to just say that they're discriminating you against your hair, but they most likely are. So I'm just wondering about that too. And I know I think Sheila raised her hand first, and then we'll go to, I don't want to mispronounce your name, Adama, and then Melodie, but please correct me if I pronounce your name wrong.
Hi, I'm sorry that I'm not showing my video, but I do want to respond to Taj as older social worker, not that old, but someone that's been in the field for about 30 years. So, and I think you'll learn this as you get, as you grow in your profession and in different venues. So I've been a social worker over 30 plus years. And I think that you just have to be who you are. If we continue to try as Black women to please everybody, we will never master that. it's virtually impossible. Hair is a big thing, especially if you are in a workplace with predominantly white coworkers. They don't understand. And then I've been in most of my jobs, I have been the only Black person in the office. So what I've had to do is basically tell myself and speak to myself to say that I am worthwhile, I am lovely, I am wonderful, this is who God made me, and this is my hair. White people do ask questions about our hair. They'll make comments about, oh, your hair was short yesterday, now it's long today. So sometimes I just joke and say, yeah, I have a button. I press the button and my hair grew like Rapunzel, you know, the next day. So I think though, it's incumbent upon our employers and our supervisors to provide an atmosphere of protection. And at any point you don't feel that you are being protected and you are being respected as an employee, follow the hierarchical structure. You go speak to your supervisor first. And if that person doesn't give you any answers or help you, go to the next person. Everybody has a boss. That's what I always say. I work at a university, I've worked in a hospital, I've worked in domestic violence agencies. It is everywhere. Unfortunately, we can't get away from it. But the thing to do is to find those support systems in that agency, follow the hierarchical structure, know the HR policies, and report everybody, basically. But keep your head up high, love who you are. God made you who you are. God made us who we are. Our nose, our lips, our hair, it's made to be different, because if we all were alike, this would be a very, very boring world. I'm done. Thank you.
Taj, and you did see my name right. It is Adama. Thank you. But I just wanted to encourage you, just as Sheila did. I literally was going to say the same thing. You are beautiful in your own right, and you are different. And it's so important that your employers see that. Most importantly, you have to be confident in yourself. I have been in the field a very long time. I also had my BSW, went to MSW. So, you know, I've had different jobs, and I was also very uncomfortable because of what I saw. Like my employer, my coworkers, everyone was so different from me. They were also white, and I felt as if I had to always have my hair done. I felt like I couldn't, you know, like I just didn't fit in. But as you get older, as you'll see, and I don't want to just say older, but as you continue in the field and you are very comfortable with whatever it is that you're doing as a social worker, the more you're not taking anyone's mess or anything that they have to say that is negative. And it's also important that we speak up, because we're advocating for not just ourselves, but for our clients. And when we see things that are not what they should be, we're able to say like, nah, this is not okay. I have to speak against it. So it's important that you do it for yourself. You do not have to change at all. It's important that you stay who you are. And I'm also going to encourage you to, as you move up, as you are growing as a social worker, try working in different demographics and see what it is you might prefer. I've worked in so many different aspects of social work, so many different employers. And I have to say, like, even as I'm working now as a school social worker in Newark, in an urban community, I have never felt more at home than I in any other job that I've worked. But I was open to trying new things. And so I just want to encourage you to do the same.
Thank you, Adama. I think Melodie had her hand next.
Thank you. I know you called for Black women first, but as an older experienced social worker who is Hopi and Navajo, I also want to talk about the hair issue with you, Taj, as well as any other young people. I am so glad you're asking this question, you're pushing back, and you have not changed. So some 30 years ago, when I was a freshly minted MSW, myself and an Asian American lawyer who was a JD, we both showed up at court representing a tribe that we were hired to represent. We were treated so poorly in the courtroom. And the way it discredited our recommendations and everything we had to say on behalf of the tribe and the children was so intense that my colleague, my Asian American colleague, just chopped off all her hair. And what I did henceforth, literally for the next 20 plus years, was I would wear my hair back in a bun. And, that was our generation. We caved to that. And I really appreciate and love all of you that are questioning, that are defying this, that are not buying into, I need to chop my hair, I need to straighten my hair, I need to curl my hair, whatever. Being yourself, being your professional self deserves to be respected. And I just want to share that with you. I'm proud of all of you.
Thank you so much, Melody. Thank you. And I can say personally that I've learned and I've grown to advocate and speak out because I've seen others pave that path for us from the time you started in gay social worker and seeing how you started to speak out and those from your generation as well. So thank you so much for sharing. And then I'll give it to Kelly to share. And then Shawn, Lisa, I see that you're here too. And I know you had wanted to speak earlier, so we'll give you time too.
Thank you. So I guess I'd be considered more of an experienced social worker. I haven't been in quite as long as Sheila said, 30 years. I've been in for 20 years. And since being in the field, I've always been in management. And it has always been a struggle for me because in all cases, I've always been the first Black, the only Black. And I've learned the rules of engagement to advance, how to dress, how to speak and all that. And fortunately or unfortunately, has been successful. I finally made it to the C-suite. And so, but I think a lot of this, so my blonde hair, I have never, ever worn blonde hair. And I have always over the years, like on the weekends, I'd have different types of hair, but I got to get ready for work. And so I finally decided a few weeks ago that I was not doing that. And so when I walked into my executive meeting with my blonde hair and it was big eyes, so people are still commenting on it. But so one, what I would say, Taj, is definitely I agree with what people are saying in terms of advocating and being yourself. And I know how difficult and intimidating that could be. And for many people, I think it's one thing to say to stand your ground and be yourself and then potentially lose your job because you could be yourself and stand your ground all you want to. But if the people who have the power are not willing to accept it or believe it, we can fight the fight, but we have to fight it in a way you also don't, so it's that balance, I think. And what I really would like, so one of the things, I use my circle of influence and my position that I have is I have a platform. And so I really push us as an organization to challenge these things. So we have groups internally that are looking at policy and procedure. One of the first things that we looked at and examined was revamping our dress code. What is professional? Who gets to define that? And make sure we have diverse people at the table to weigh in. But one thing that I really hope we move towards, because the climate is so ripe for it, I think if we as social workers come together, I think a lot of these organizations need to be called to task. What are you doing? It's hard as an individual, I think, to speak up in different situations when you may not have as much authority or power and you feel like you're smaller. But if we come as a group, and challenge these organizations, is one thing to walk the walk. Or to talk the talk. We want to see how you are walking the walk. And so as, an entity, I think that, we question and challenge these organizations. We want to know, what steps are you taking to create a diverse environment for your staff, for the communities that we serve. I think it's intimidating as a one person to do that. And I do wish, and I'm hoping to see more of that happening collectively as a voice. I could speak for what we're doing as an organization. I talk to many people of color in the field working at various organizations, and I know they don't have that environment being created. They don't, it's like if they're scared to speak up because you may lose your job, that's not okay. And I feel that's a heavy weight for them to bear. And it would be nice if there was some advocacy as the social work group or somebody challenging and questioning these organizations to demonstrate their work. So that's all.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for those remarks. And I'm so glad that, Taj, you asked that question and we made space for that, because, this is why we're here. This is the power of the revolution, and the mentorship is so, so important. So I can't see you on my screen, Taj, but I hope you took some things away from what everyone shared. We have Andrea and then Sheila. I see your hands raised, and I know we have also Shawn, Lisa in line as well. So Andrea, we'll give it off to you.
Hi, everybody. Two things. One, I share Kelly. Yes. And we know there is risk sometimes involved. And so you do need to have allies of color behind you. Be connected to organizations that can support you, colleagues that can support you. I think on an individual level, and this comes with, I will not even say the A word, but it comes with experience, and so that you will get to know who you are, you know yourself, you know your boundaries, and you don't allow transgression of your boundaries. And I mean, we've all had that, and so, and depending on what day it is, I may go one way, but sometimes I choose to expose the lie, and I'll ask you sometimes we can do just what we're trained to do as social workers. Let me ask this question. Help me understand, what is it that's unprofessional about my hair? Help me understand that. And then when they say that, you expose the lie to that one. Well, why would you think it's unkempt? What makes you presume that it's not clean? And sometimes you have to expose the lie. And then when they realize that there is no validity, even if they don't realize it, others will, that there is no validity to it. And then you also, again, do what we're trained to do. Use your systems. You have HR, you have EOC, you have use those, because nobody should be made to feel like less than they are because they are who they are. But unless we resist, and you resist in ways that will not put you at undue risk, it will continue always. But yeah, sometimes just expose the lie. Now I admit that some days I'm feeling differently and I respond very differently to that. But on a good day, I will say, no, why do you think that I don't know how to do my hair? What do you see wrong with my hair? And make it concrete for me. And then once you've said that to me, now I have something concrete to take to HR, because we can't, know what your systems deal with, feelings, impressions, da 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 da. Tell me concretely what's wrong with my hair. Now I have something to talk about, to take to HR, to take to my advocacy organization, to take to, my colleagues. Because until we resist, this will keep going forever and ever. And also to understand the history of denigrating and policing our hair in this country. There was a specific reason for that. And we need to understand that history too, so that we are armed with that when we go into these conversations. Because if we don't, it'll just keep happening and happening and happening. And the truth is that just like everybody else, we have the right to look any way we want to look, and even if I don't agree with your hair, which I think it looks lovely, but even if I didn't, I don't have a right to say that either to you, because you have a right to look the way you feel you need to look and not be, insulted by that. So yeah, we have to resist, and we have to, but it comes also of knowing, having confidence in who you are and knowing your boundaries. And there's several boundaries that you're talking about. You're talking about your professional boundary, but you're also talking about your personal boundary. As I said a few weeks ago, yes, I am, social worker Andrea with this degree and that degree and that degree, but I'm also Estelle's daughter. And there are only certain things you can say to Estelle's daughter. And we have to know that and be okay with making that real for people. Because if we don't, then that just empowers them to keep doing whatever it is they're doing. And it never stops. I'm done. Yay.
I love that, Andrea. Thank you so much. I mean, I just saw so many like hand claps and the reactions, and let's give some more because that was so absolutely on point, empowering, true, and just I was just like taking notes on Google Doc, like, okay, like this is how you call out people, especially with the power. There's a huge power imbalance, and thank you so much for that. That was really valuable. And then so right now we have in line Sheila, and then Shawn Lisa, and then Robert Brown. And that's the order we'll go in.
I just want to say I echo everything everybody said, and not to say that what we're saying is an easy task, but because once you open your mouth and you complain, it's a very, very lonely spot. But I would encourage you, as Kelly said, get some supports around you. This is for anybody that needs to make a report. Have a lot of supports around you, somebody that can hold you up during that time, because it's not an easy place to be once you do make that complaint.
Thank you, Sheila. And so I think Shawn Lisa is in the room, so we'll call on Shawn Lisa and pose, the bigger question of how are you disrupting racism in your practice, and then a follow-up question, and it's coming up based on our discussion and what we've been talking about. But I'm wondering, and I'd love to hear from the larger group, is reporting the only way or the most suggested way in how we dismantle and disrupt racism? Are there other useful tactics that we should know and we should start, to think about and prepare for? But before we get to that, Shawn Lisa, we'd love to hear from you.
Okay, how are you? Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure for me to join. Sorry, I was late. Traffic was crazy for me to get to my office, and now I'm sitting in Hawaii. Not. So it's such a pleasure to be able to speak to this group, and I don't know how much they were informed about me, but most of you might have read in the paper about a headmaster who had made an African-American boy kneel an apology. And this was a school, St. Martin de Porres, Marianis School. It was, all through the news. I can't speak, exactly about the details of the case, but out of that situation, they have named me principal of the school. Just history-wise, so you guys can understand, I was a parent at the school. My youngest is 8th grade. He's graduating from there. So I have a very close relationship with the Marianis brothers. I also, prior to this position, I was at Kellenberg, which was one of the high schools that the brothers run. I was their first social worker, which was an interesting experience ever, because, to be in the business as long as they have, never having a social worker, I was able to fulfill that role first, being a minority, and then being the first social worker, and being able to bridge pastoral and mental health together is what the brothers needed so that they could see the worth of our field, and so devising all of the structures and procedures for that. So because of that equity that I had built with them and being a parent, when this situation did arise, I did, as we do, a social worker come in with our capes to say, hey, do you mind if I go over to the building, before the outlash of the news comes, just to kind of maintain the homeostasis of the building. And so the brothers were like, please go. And not knowing, of course, the first day of being there, it was really like a test run to see if I would be willing to be the principal for the school. So out of all of that negativity that occurred, I will say that, the brothers, I mean, of course, it was me that was chosen, but I think they made a wise decision, in choosing someone to fulfill the role that was more reflective of the community in which we have at the school. The demographics is, African American, Latino, of course, Caribbean American, and a small population of Caucasian students that are there. But, the environment, it's Uniondale, New York, that's also, again, a demographic neighborhood of, African American Latinos. But the lack of the diversity within the staff, and a lot of times in Catholic schools, there is a lack of diversity in the staff, but being able to choose a leader who reflected the environment, I think was good to help, ease some of what was happening in the media. But then what made it best, and I always say to them, is that, they got the best bang for their buck, because of course, my first heart is a social worker. And then I also have my master's in educational leadership. So by having those two components, what better way to be able to fill a role of a principal for pre-K to 8th grade than with a social worker? And so it was such an honor to hear from the National Association of Social Workers thanking me and saying, wow, a social worker at the helm of a school. And not every principal gets to be named in the newspaper, but, it was publicly named in the newspaper. So it really is an honor to come, here. Just kind of listening to, the conversations about hair, and at least for me, the way that I see my role and how my advocacy can help within my environment. I will say, just as a sub comment, this was an isolated situation. This wasn't something like this building is filled with racism that's going on, but can they do better? Absolutely. Were there disparities that are going on between our other middle school and my middle school? Absolutely. Am I comfortable? Because as some of you have said in here, I was almost like feeling angry that I'm like been in this field so long, like I'm over 20 years in this field. I'm like, wait, that means I'm an old social worker now, so it's like, but I have the expertise and the lack of fear to say, yeah, no, that's not right. When you get to Taj, when you get to our age, you're like, you don't care anymore. You're just like, yeah, I don't think that's going to work. Yeah, let's address that differently. So I'm very open with confronting them with the disparities. And I question anytime that they might say something, just as an example, one of our middle schools has iPads, the other middle school didn't. And I said, well, what's the disparity in that? Well, the kids over there, they could afford it. I said, so you want me to stand in front of the parents and tell them that you chose to not give iPads because you thought that that group of kids could afford it and this one? Oh, no, that's not what we need. How many iPads do you need? I'll take 120. So you just get to a point of being comfortable and just recognizing when there's problems. And so at least for myself and what my vision is for this school is just being able to understand that we don't need to lower standards, because that systemic thought process of what they can't or they are not able to be successful, I see very differently. I rise the standards for everyone to achieve, and we can do it. And I feel like, at least for me, I can say the brothers are very in tune to this. I think that, there will be a lot of beauty that has come out of this horrible situation that occurred, because it did portray a mark of us as something to be so negative, but there's a lot of beauty and a lot of good education and a lot of success coming, from, like I said, my 2 younger children have gone through the system and we've never had a problem, but again, as I said before, the disparities, can we address those? Yes. As a social worker, will I? 100%. Will I help to cultivate even just my parents? Because I think sometimes, minority parents are sometimes in the background. They're not asked to be on PTA. Sometimes they're not asked to be, in advocacy roles for their school. And so do I want to be more inclusive and bring families in so they can feel like they have a right and a place? Am I looking at staffing to say, where can I diversify my staffing a little better? Not to say that this is like anti someone else. I want the best person for the job, but will it be nice to be able to say, hey, let's open our pool a little bit more so that we can say, hey, I need some more Latinos. I need more African American people to come into the school, because it is a very powerful thing. And I would keep you guys for about 20 hours, but I will say this, something that even for myself and being in this field for so long, and I know that we all feel like it's like, okay, we're minorities, we're here and we reflect, but being in this environment has really even opened my mind and touched my heart on different levels. Like one of the first days that I came around to all of the classes and introduced myself as the principal, and this is something I'm sharing with you guys, like a little first grader, it's like, hi, I'm Mrs. Torres. I'm the new principal for the school. And this little first grader, she rose her hand and she said, you look like Kamala Harris. I was like, ow. But then I was like, wow, what did that mean for this little girl to see this type of leadership in this building? I have kindergartner girls that drew this beautiful picture, and there's three girls, I'm in the middle, of course, and then the two of them, and we're holding hands, and we all have brown faces, and they're like, we love you, Principal Torres, and I have it framed in my office. And so in this short amount of time, it is kind of surreal to see what maybe some of us have lacked. I grew up in Peoria, Illinois, in Midwestern, now I'm in New York. And so I didn't have a lot of leadership or teachers that, even had a tinge of color like I did. And so to now be in this position and to see how meaningful it is, it's really mind blowing, so I do say, I'm honored, I'm glad that I, decided to do so much schooling and kind of bridge these two components together to put me into this place. I've traveled many roads. Like I still have my private practice, I'm still, on the grind, I'm still doing a lot of advocacy, but at least dealing with racism on the lower, my preschoolers all the way to my 8th graders, I just feel like they will have a different voice now. They don't have to just be like some of you are saying. It's like sometimes in environments where everybody around you was, a different race and you didn't feel like you had a voice. The kids that are going to be graduating from my school are going to have the voice because they had a leader that looked like them. And so they're going to feel like, oh, I could do anything I want. I could say anything I want because Ms. Torres was there and she's told us it was okay to say anything. So I almost fear for the high school because we do have our feeding high schools that aren't as diverse, but they know that they're coming from St. Martin's, and it's just going to be, it's really, really good, so feel free to ask questions if you have, because I know I'm kind of late coming in, but anything that you guys would like to ask, whether it's, administratively or, through social work or just more about, the road that I've taken in my career.
Thank you so
You're welcome.
Shawn, Lisa, thank you so much. And there was a bunch of hands that popped up, and everyone is saying in the chat that the school is lucky to have you in this position for your role model and your mentorship for these students. And just thank you for coming and speaking tonight. Robert Brown, I know your hand has been raised for a while, so.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm calling you from the Los Angeles, California. It's kind of sunny out here, warm. Anyway, my 2 cents on the subject is that I wish I had known some of the things when I was working at a skilled nurse facilities, which I had 2 very negative experiences. One of the most impactful though was I had a supervisor who was MSW just like I was. And instead of actually guiding me and give me some counsel on how, she was actually kind of bullying me into trying to bully me into doing things like backdating Medicare documentation to a time before I even started working at that particular facility, or other documentation to people I've never seen. And I refused to do that because I do want to be licensed. I did want to be licensed someday. And I should have known there was a red flag when she started disclosing what I thought was inappropriate stuff. She referred to Black people as Afro-Americans, and that she had said that we used to live in Texas and we had an Afro-American woman that lived nearby. I'll give you a G-rated version of what she said. And she said, one day my dad left our family and had sexual relations with this Afro-American woman and had a child with her. And so I started to get the impression that she is mad at all Black men and Black people in general because of what her father did. I had nothing to do with that. And eventually what happened is that they, some trumped up cases, they wrote me up for baloney, as far as I'm concerned. And then I was ultimately, not only was I terminated, they actually sent some false charges to unemployment. So for 3 months, no money was coming in. Thank God my wife has a real good job where she almost makes 6 figures a year. But even in California, 6-figure income a year is just barely making it by in some cases. I did eventually recouped all the unemployment benefits over the 3-month period of time, but I shouldn't have had to go through that. So this was definitely a racist situation that was very, had I been educated on the importance of getting liability protection, which would cover attorney fees. Well, actually, I lucked out by not having to have attorneys represent me. I actually wound talking to a judge at Workman's Comp Appeal Court in order to have my this particular lie overturned. I think for men in particular, in this particular industry, it's very difficult. First of all, it is considered, correct me if I'm wrong, social workers are considered mostly decidedly service, which is predominantly female. So when a male goes into this particular position, unless they work at the VA or somewhere else where it's almost expected that the social workers will be male due to the culture at the VA. We pretty much have 1 or 2 strikes against us to begin with. That's it.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Robert. And I mean, I'm just enraged that people just get to ruin someone's job, be racist, and get away with it. And it's so common, and I mean, we all know it's unfair. It's just so evil and unfair that people get to do that and ruin others' livelihood. I'm really glad you did get the unemployment money back. And I hope that everyone here can just, if anything, take away on how to protect yourself from the consequences that come sometimes from confronting racist coworkers, or, like getting the courage to speak out as well. Going back to like getting that evidence, having your license insured, having that paper trail, making sure you have your back covered, because you never know when you're going to need it. And then I'll go to Victoria and Leticia.
Hello, my name is Victoria, and I guess for me, as a young Hispanic woman, this is something that I have to confront every day, and has been something that I've confronted in every single one of my jobs. It wasn't until I actually graduated with my bachelor's in social work that I recognized that I was experiencing the wage gap in multiple different scenarios, in different jobs, and in those, and I think in the realm of being a social worker, I also have to advocate for myself, not necessarily with the job, any of my current jobs, obviously, but, in 2 of my previous jobs, addressing the wage gap was something that I did bring up, and that was something that I did bring up to HR. In another job, it is something that I currently am pursuing on a legal basis, because it was brought up and I was basically told, based off, for multiple reasons, that I didn't deserve what a blonde hair, blue-eyed high school dropout was getting, and I thought it was just very interesting. And I think that as a social worker, it requires us advocating for ourselves as well as just as much as we advocate for our clients. And in a lot of ways, as weird as this sounds, being okay with walking away if your values don't align, right? Like if they're unable to value you as a person, then why stay and offer your time and energy to an organization that is basically oppressing you as a human being, and I think part of breaking this is us standing up, us filing complaints with Workforce Solutions on any level that it is us like being a part of diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings. It's us being a part of all of those things, not just for clients, but for ourselves, and that's really all I wanted to say in listening to everybody, because it's really easy to see the systemic racism when we're standing up and fighting for our clients, but you feel it too as a worker in knowing what those are, you know. So I want to encourage anybody that is experiencing that to like stand up and advocate for themselves too, you know, and know that this world is needing lots of helpers. So if your current job isn't working for you, find somewhere else that will. So that's all I got to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Victoria, for sharing and speaking. And I just wanted to highlight, because I had also used the word complaint, and that is what organization, that's the language of the organization. And Mika in the chat pointed out, while it is like formally recognized as complaints, it's like we're speaking our truth, and we should not dismiss or negate that because the language of the organizations use is a complaint, because like a complaint is, you still have to prove yourself, but we know this was our truth and this is what we experienced, and no one can question that. So I just wanted to highlight that off mute. And I think Leticia, you're up next, and then we have Randy after.
Hi, everyone. I'm loving everything that everyone said. And I think we all know that with racism, it's not something you kind of get later on in life. It's something that you experience very early on, from everywhere, all the time, every day. And I'm not convinced that in places like internships, while you're earning your BSW or your MSW, that schools have properly figured out what to do to protect students, because they'll have maybe long-term relationships with other even other schools, and you're going to hear a lot that there was discrimination, that something happened, that there was just something that should not have happened to a social worker. And a lot of the times, I think even the field instructors kind of just say, well, you have to grin and bear it, because otherwise you have to start your whole internship year over. And I don't know if that's healthy. And it, like, at least with the job, you can kind of figure out for yourself whether or not you want to leave and start that over. But when like your whole degree is on the line, when having an unpaid internship to begin with, I feel is part of the systemic racism of not recognizing that we can't get to amazing, awesome opportunities the way that white people can, that we can afford a full year of an internship while either not working or working and doing it all, I'm not convinced that we're starting ourselves off on a good foot being unprotected and not knowing how to advocate for ourselves as interns to begin with. So I just wanted to bring that up.
I appreciate you bringing that up, especially because it's not just our work environment. Like, us students who are going into internships experience the same thing. We're going into that environment where we're not protected. We're almost forced to appease, and it's like we're almost told unconsciously, be silent. And then like if we're pulling themes from what everyone else has shared, it's almost like they bank on the silence of like us not confronting them and telling them that, so that they can continue to do what they're doing. And then, as Andrea had shared, like, confront it, don't be silent about it. And it puts them in a place where they're forced to reckon with the racism that they're perpetuating, even if they think it's not harmful, or like racism, or it's like concealed racism. So 100%. Thank you for bringing in that student perspective as well. Randy, thank you.
Hello, everyone. I just wanted to, just add on to all the great things that the participants, as well as BIPOC individuals, has been sharing. And first and foremost, we got to know and understand that being a BIPOC woman or man, you have to know that you are original. That's first and foremost, and you have to stand on that foundation. You have to understand that the social work values and the social work code of ethics, as well as the competencies is what we got to stand by, because those are the fundamentals that we're going to use throughout our profession. Understanding the person and environment, that you're coming from a different environment, coming into an environment that a system is already created to opt us out, not to accept us. So these are the things that we have to know and understand when we go into our profession or into our careers, that these are the challenges and the barriers that we're going to face. But understanding the social work values, and understand you have to treat every individual as a human, not just the clients, but also your coworkers. And when you fail to address the racism that's in the workspace, you're basically perpetuating the internalized trauma that you already have inherited from our foreparents for the last 400 plus years. So these are things that we have to be aware of, and the things that we have to carry with us every day. Once a social worker, you're always a social worker. Never take that social work cap off. And you got to represent it to the fullest. And stand on your square with confidence, and never believe what someone who may have issues believe of you, but believe in the values, believe in the code of ethics, believe in the competencies, and believe in yourself as an original person. To also add on to that is that we have to know how to respond instead of to react. Because when you react, I know a few people on the panel have spoken about it, you're basically reacting with emotions, and sometimes those emotions is not thought out. Sometimes those emotions are negative emotions. So if we respond in a way that give us a chance to think about what we're going to say and how we're going to say it, not only are we addressing the issue, we're also educating the individual that's perpetuating the systemic racism within that system. Also, I just want to throw out there, once we are able to continue these behaviors and showing improvement through our ways and actions, this will help fight and combat the racism that exists within these systems. And when you look at the overall picture, you have to say to yourself, am I in this field to help, or am I in this field to help people live? Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you, Randy. And I wanted to highlight everything, uplift everything you said, and also what Sharon had said. And I know, Natalie, you raised your hand, so I'm going to give you space. But, what Sharon wrote in the chat was, some of these field placements are where racism is occurring and schools are not holding these agencies accountable. Schools of social work don't always have policies to address the racist and problematic stuff that BIPOC, BSW, and MSW students face. And 100%, a lot of the times they do not have those resources, but also a lot of the times the reality is that the schools are also the places where white supremacy and racism is being perpetuated and upheld. So, for BIPOC, I am facing this in my field internship, in my agency, but then I'm going to my school to, address this, speak my piece, speak my truth, file this formal complaint. But, they're really not on my side because for political reasons, for funding, they want to maintain the relationship with this agency. So in reality, it doesn't do anything. And, like a safe, and I don't know what, a safe environment ever could be for a BIPOC person. And so, we have these formal, beautiful things in writing, but when we turn it into action, none of this is happening. And then it goes back into a conversation of you need to prove, you need to file all of these grievances. You need to go through 10 steps to go back one to get out of that placement or out of that classroom or out of that room where you are being triggered and where you are being traumatized because of, that colleague, that like that supervisor, that social worker, that client, whatever it is. So I just wanted to uplift that. But Natalie, I will pass it on to you. And then I know we're getting closer to 7:21. And Sharita, I see your hand is raised too. And then we'll pose our last question to the group. And then we'll start to close for tonight.
I just want to talk about schools of social work and internships in regards to the placements and where students are placed. And so in the city where I live, we have opposite extremes of schools of social work. We have one that's prestigious, very high income sort of social work school, and we have one that's the exact opposite. And so I have been a field instructor for the one that's the exact opposite. And I can say that they are helping to perpetuate a lot of the racism by allowing, as people have mentioned, the institutions where they're placing their students to pick and choose social workers of a certain race or a certain color or a certain economic background, just so, people can be comfortable. And I think that's the problem with schools of social work. I think it would be so great if everyone did an internship within a population or with a population that they hadn't been exposed to, that they didn't grow up in. That's how you learn, and I think, it's just twofold in that there are preferential treatments for certain internship placements, and it goes on in schools of social work. And then the flip side of that is I used to work at a employer as a hospital social worker, and my supervisor, who had worked there for 35 years, who was a white woman, would say she didn't want a social worker from that prestigious school to work at our public hospital because she didn't think that they were prepared to handle the demographic of clients we had coming through there. And so, it's even something that's recognized by, social workers in the field, if they just, I think a lot of them would admit that that's the case. And that's all I had to say.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Natalie, for that. I really value your input in that. And now, I hope I'm saying your name right, Sharita.
Yes, it's Sharita. I wanted to add to this this particular topic because I've experienced that personally, and I've experienced that as a field instructor over the last 15 years. And I've been a field instructor. We have 3 programs in 3 towns that are very close together in my state. And I've been a field instructor for all 3 of them. And in saying that, there's a lot of competition for placements. And so, as an MSW student, I wanted this particular placement, and they told me it was no way that they were going to be able to get the memorandum of understanding together in time enough for me to be placed there. And so I, very close to beginning the time that I was supposed to begin my placement, I didn't have one. And so they found one at a place that really didn't even want to work with a macro student and tried to fit the circle and the square together that don't fit, and kind of put me in this place where I didn't want to be. But, it was my last year. I was ready to go. I was a non-traditional, student. A lot of people in MSW world are, but in my particular situation as a Black woman, I needed to work. Even though I had a BSW, I couldn't do an advanced standing program. I had to wait for, a part-time program where I had to spend more money and stay in a program longer in order to get my MSW, because that I couldn't afford to not work. And so here I am at the end of, my last year, and I desperately need to get out of there with my MSW. And they told me there was no way they could secure the placement that I wanted. Now, ironically, I took the placement, the one they offered me that didn't necessarily want a macro student. And I had to make my, I had to become a direct practice student in order to be in that placement, because they were not advocating for this entity to give me any kind of experience based on what I was in my program for. So that was, that was one strike against them. And then 3 weeks later, ironically, 2 white female students got the placement that I wanted, that they said was not going to come, was not going to happen. They did not call me and offer me, we got the MOU situated. We now have available positions to go, for, at this hospital to do this work. We know you really wanted it. You're in a placement that's not really in line with what you need right now. Here is your, opportunity to do some higher level stuff in this department that I wanted to go into. And so, I just felt like out there on my own, much like me navigating the world, not feeling very supported, but really needing to get out of there with a degree, because I couldn't afford not to have the degree. And so I'll transition into in 3 years ago, I had to take a student who was in a placement where the placement field instructor kind of got called out by the student, because the person was being very racist in their interactions with the clients of color that were coming in for services and had needs. And so the student spoke up, and the school did not advocate for that student. That student was well into that first semester, and that field instructor terminated that person's position. And, luckily my student had fell through from another school, and I had a slot. So not only did I have, I of course took this student because the horrible experience I had, and it was a horrible experience as a MSW student in that placement, because they wanted to wanted me to take a break right in the last semester, because they didn't feel like I was what was the word? I wasn't adjusting to the placement they had for me, even though I deserved to be advocated for and put in a place, just like any other student that was in line with what I was doing and what I was being trained to do. So not only did I took this person was traumatized by their experience, but I had to help them be successful in the placement with me, but I had to do a lot of healing work for that student because of what they experienced, and it was so not fair. It was so not fair. And so, I say all of that to say that, I've had my MSW for a very long time. And, these things, these transgressions are still happening. They're still happening to, people of color, and it is not right. That's all I have to add.
Thank you, Sharita, for sharing. And I am so sorry that that is your experience, that is what you had to go through. And then, then you have to do the work of the healing for the other student. And like you said, that is not fair. And unfortunately, like such a reality of, when we are in these spaces. I don't see anyone else's hands raised. Would anyone else like to come off mic? No? Okay. I mean, it is 7:30, but if folks want to, stay and, continue the conversation, Noshin and I are happy to do that as well. But if there's nothing in regards to this question, we do have a last question for, the folks in the room. So, and, this has been coming up since we've started these town halls back in September. And we've talked about, the racism and the white supremacy that we deal with, as students, from peers that are going to go into this field, from supervisors, from professors, from colleagues. And, I think it comes really, it's really congruent with the discussion that we're having tonight and the disruption of racism, and how do we do that, especially because there has been so much great demonstration from, everyone that spoke in the chat and, off mic, and like the leadership that, and, the advocacy that everyone's showing with each other. So I wanted to know, when we're looking at leadership positions, and we're looking, in this macro setting, and specifically in relations to, an executive team or a board of directors team, and racism happening in those situations, because racism happens everywhere. It doesn't mean, you become a C-suite level person and, Kelly spoke to that, you don't face racism, right? So how do we, are there any tips or tricks in addressing that? Do people have experiences that they want to talk more about that? And, when you make it, you still didn't make it because you still have to go through all these other things and you still have to prove your value and your worth. So I wanted to pose that out there, and talk about, in that kind of realm, like in this leadership, kind of realm, in this board of directors room, the facing of racism, and how have folks handled that, or how have you not handled that? I wish you could have handled it. That was a loaded question for our last question, but I see, Liz, your hand's up, so I'm gonna call on you, and then Leticia, your hand is after that, so thank you.
Okay, I guess I would just address it as like looking at any, whether it's the organization you work for, the university, and that's what I think of mostly right now, because they are the ones training the social workers going out. The university I graduated from, dean is white, associate deans are white, entire leadership team is white. And they continue to reiterate that change is this gradual process and it doesn't happen overnight. And I think it's like, I had a long conversation with my dean after all the stuff I've been going through. And it's just like, they don't get it. As a white person, they just don't get it. And it's really frustrating. And one of the things I said is to examine why your team entirely is white. White women run the entire department. And so when I say something and I say like, I don't feel heard by you, and I feel like I'm being gaslit while I'm trying to explain what's going on, it's because you have no lived experience. And so whether that's getting your class, if you're in grad school still, to write a letter to your department, whether that's looking at the NASW chapters and saying, why is your leadership look this way? Why does your university staff look this way? My entire grad school experience, I had one African-American professor and no other people of color. It was all white professors who taught that reverse racism was real. So the just absurdity of like this, what I've been through in this profession in just such a small amount of time. And speaking with the dean of my university, like, it's just so evident to me that she will never get it. And that's why I say, like, the more people that continue to pester them, the better, because otherwise it's going to be one voice against this massive organization. And it's hard because you feel like you're up against this like beast. But the more people we have, like whether that's writing a joint letter, whatever it is, asking them to examine why their positions, why their staff, why all of it looks the way it does, why our profession looks the way it does for the most part. I'll stop there. Thank you all.
No, oh my God, Liz, just everything you said is so true. It is so incredibly difficult, and you are going into the mouth of the beast when you're confronting a majority white administration. And the backlash that you get sometimes can be really traumatic too. I know I have so much trauma from the backlash I've experienced from my own personal encounters, and it's terrifying. It's unfair that it's scary, but it's so needed. But it's everything you said, Liz, is so true. And I actually want to point out what Amelia was saying, and it's so true. I also agree that I don't think any white person should ever profit from teaching anti-racism because they're centering our experiences. So why should they get paid to teach people not to be racist based on our lived experiences? It makes absolutely no sense. You're rectifying the system's fault that benefits you do not get paid for it, but we're being harmed by it. It makes no sense. And if you truly are anti-racist, then I think any white person who is doing anti-racist work needs to reckon with that idea and know that you shouldn't be profiting off of our harm and our trauma. It makes no sense. And I don't even know how to explain the trauma that comes from even challenging leadership when it's not in your favor, because you get the backlash, you get the gaslighting, you get the questioning yourself, did you do the right thing? And then you get the second wave of trauma. You get scared to speak up again because you're like, am I being sensitive, or is this really my fault? And it's like no one's on your side. And then maybe you have one person or two person on your side, but it's against you. And it's that unfair battle that I think a lot of us have to fight constantly, whether it's in school or in your work environment or an organization you're working with. I mean, I think that's what really started this whole movement too. So I mean, just thank you, Liz, for pointing that out, and for everyone who is sharing. It's difficult confronting leadership, and shout out to everyone who takes on that courage, because it can be a really traumatic experience. And I think the Tisha had her hand raised, and then Monica.
Thank you so much for that. That was, yeah. Before I got laid off because of COVID last year, my last employer actually had a very intense year or so, probably many years before that, where they had an issue with racism, and they decided magically as a group, maybe we need to have like an ad hoc for this. And while I wasn't on the executive team, I was a government contracts assistant. And as a social worker, I was like, yes, get me in here. I put my name in the email, like I want to be a part of the group to decide yes before we can even get to the group that talks about like how this is all going to work and who is going to be in charge of what. And thankfully they did let me in, and that was like my first step into it. But I could tell that, you know, I'm one of the few Hispanic people or the people of color there. And, you know, there's not enough people in the room. And they're like, well, how can we get more people in the room? And I was like, well, you have to hire more people and higher levels to begin with. And then we can talk about, you know, the anti-racism problem throughout the whole agency. And you have to bring the people who it's going to affect in the lower levels on board for this too. And they said, no, we want only to have like just the executive for now as a trial. And I was just like, okay, there's nothing I can do to stop that, but at least I'm in the door and I'm here. And I really tried my best as one of the few people there that had any experience being a person of color to say, okay, well, you know, if we're going to pick groups, make sure they're as diverse as possible for the few people that we actually have here. And let's make sure that, you know, they're in both the higher level and the lower level ad hoc of this, because why are we doing this if not to bring more people to the door to speak and to say like, this is the problem, this is what I'm passionate about, and use like what they have and say, yes, you can totally speak, you can bring your authentic self, because that's going to help us evolve as an agency if you're really trying at all to move forward and to break down the barriers of institutional racism. And I think that's one of the rare things that happens. If you see something in your agency that's doing like an ad hoc, if you want to talk to someone and say, I want to start a group where we talk about things, and this is for whatever it is you want it to be, I think that's the first step in terms of like what you can do at work that's separate from what you already have, because sometimes we can't do anything with what we have. But if we can start something that's a little bit more control, that's a little bit more of us saying, I have my voice, I have my expertise as a social worker, I have my expertise as someone who is a person of color, and I think that this would benefit other people of color. And hopefully one day it would also extend to other people, the higher ups in the agency, because in the macro world for a social worker, I know it's very isolating. Sometimes you might be the only social worker there. Sometimes it's you and other social workers, but you're so far apart because you're doing different advocacy work or policy work or what have you. So like as a macro social worker, I saw that opportunity and I was like, finally, yes, that is something that should be in every agency, even if there's going to be mistakes along the way. Like you have to kind of expect that. But I thought that was a very important lesson to learn, to actually be a part of something, making the decisions. And it affected me and everyone else.
Thank you, Leticia, for that. Thank you. And I see now Monica has her hand, so.
One of the things that's kind of stood out to me in our conversation tonight, and just thinking about answering your last question, the concept of diversity and inclusion and equality and equity. I feel like on some levels we're living in the matrix. It's just a repeat of history. If you know American history with regards to how we address racism, we address whatever the systematic issue is, and we get rid of that, and then racism just morphs into some other kind of manifestation. We had slavery, we got rid of that, then we had the penal system, then we got rid of that, then we had Jim Crow, then we had the civil rights movement, and where we started to get equality, where we're going to have racism manifest itself in the way that we pay people or hire people or promote people. So now, fast forward to a year ago today, we have the death of George Floyd, which set the country back on fire to want to address racism. And the buzzwords all year has been diversity and inclusion and equality and equity. The problem is we have the diversity, but we don't have the inclusion. So often diversity looks like, let's hire the person of color, let's hire the person who's LGBTQ, let's hire a woman because we only have men here. But we're not hiring them for the diversity of their perspective. We're hiring for the diversity of the appearance. And then therefore the person of color or whoever the minority might be, you get dismissed once you get there. You're here for show, you're a trophy. So there is no inclusion, it's just diversity. And then we have equality and equity. Because I know there are people who are listening who think, well, I don't want to treat the BIPOC students differently than the white students, because then that's unfair to the white students because that's not equal. But the Black students and other students of color are not receiving equity in the services that they need. We need to stop hiding behind equality to prevent us from creating equity. When I think about representation and how I'm just curious, I don't know the answer to this, but I'm just curious, how many social service agencies are there in the country, and how many of them have a Black or a person of color, Indigenous person CEO? How many schools of social work are in this country? How many deans are not white? How many chairs of a social work department are not white? How many people leading the field instruction office are not white? But we won't do targeted hires. We won't intentionally say we're only going to hire a BIPOC person. Oh, because that goes against the fair labor laws and equality. But you're using equality to not be equitable in what is needed for your agency or your students, et cetera. So I guess what I'm saying is we need to be intentional and pay attention to what we're hearing and what we're doing. If you are in a person to hire people and you say you're going to hire for diversity reasons, then you need to hire for diversity and perspective. If you really want equity, then stop hiding behind equality because it's getting in the way of getting people what they actually need.
Yes, thank you. Absolutely, 100%. Thank you so much, Monica. That was just, I don't know, like uplifting, seconding, echoing everything you just said. And I want to take a moment to address something that was mentioned in the chat, challenge it, and then also give you the right perspective to take on this, which is if you as a white person really believe that you can only believe racism exists because another white person is saying that to you, that is an absolutely wrong way to take on this approach. You shouldn't need another white person to tell you racism exists. They are not the ones living through this experience. They are not the ones going through this trauma. This is not their experience for them to validate. And I think this goes into critical race theory, where it says, these certain things are only accepted if the white people co-opt and validate this movement. We do not need white people's validation to tell us racism exists. And you should not believe racism exists just because a white person is telling it to you. If a Black, Indigenous, or a person of color is telling you racism exists, it is not your place to disagree with it and say, oh, no, it's not, and then only accept it if the oppressor is telling you that that racism exists. That's something I would challenge every white person in this room to confront and reckon with themselves and explore that discomfort and see why is it that you're seeking to gaslight and invalidate what we are saying, and only believe it if the white person is saying it. I think that's something I would ask everyone here to really see why is your first instinct to not believe us? Why is it that society structures and traditions are telling you don't believe our voice but believe the oppressor's voice? And I would just explore you and tell you right now that that is not the right way to approach it. And for anyone who thinks this way, listen to what everyone has been sharing this whole past 2 hours. Listen to what we've been saying, take from it, seek that discomfort, sit in that discomfort and learn. And I'm here to say straight up, the answer is that you shouldn't be taking it from a white person, take it from the people who are actually experiencing it. And then Andrea had her hand up, so I'll give it to Andrea now.
Well, first, thank you. Thank you for saying that. Yes, we do not need whites to validate our experience. We don't. However, you point to something that is very insidious, not only around diversity and equity, but around social work education, social services. That the dominant culture has a very good way of monetizing our misery. And that's what it becomes. It becomes an industry. You talk about the social service industry, you talk about the penal system, you talk about education, you talk all about that. They found a way they always do, to monetize our misery. And so that any effort on us to dismantle any of those pipelines puts their income at risk, and they're not willing to do that. They're not willing to make substantive change. And don't be fooled. You know, they have met a lot of issues. Being stupid is not one of them often. So they know particularly well what the issues are, and they know what they're doing. They made a conscious choice that they're not going to do that. And until we recognize that fact and acknowledge that upright, things will not ever change, because we're going under the premise that, oh, they just don't know what to do. They just BS. America is one of the most efficient countries in the world. If America decided that racism was not in its best interest, it would be gone in a month. Trust me that. It would be gone in a month. So we can't be naive and we can't be fooled about that. And I go back to Audre Lorde. The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. We have to come up with our own tools, and we have to come up with our own structures and our own systems, because they're not going to give them to us. They just aren't. Why would they? Eh? And we keep laboring under the false impression that if we just get them to see the light, if we just get them to understand, if we just get them to do that, they understand. They understand. They've always understood. This is the system. The system is not broken. Don't be misled. The system is not broken. The system is working exactly as it was intended to. And until we accept and acknowledge that fact, we'll be like the hamster in the wheel, and we'll just keep running around and around and around, and every year it'll be a whole different issue. it's not going to work that way. We have to come up with a new way. And we also have to collectively, as a people and as social workers of color, recognize our strength and our power. We have strength, we have power. Think about what would happen if every BIPOC social worker and clinician took themselves out of the marketplace for a week. Think what would happen. Think what would happen. They'd lose their minds. But we won't do that. We're either afraid to, and I know people have risks and people have to, pay mortgage and feed children and all that stuff. But we have to recognize what our power is. That's why I was so sorry that, and I have to admit that I'm old enough to remember Black Solidarity Day. And you take yourself out of the marketplace for just one day, see what happens. We have to start to recognize our power and not be afraid to use it. Otherwise, the hamster just keeps running in the wheel. It just does.
Thank you, Andrea. We always love when you come off mic, and I think I said that before, but really thank you for all those gems and everything that you said. And
I think the CIA is bugging my phone now.
yes, realizing we have power and knowing we have power. I think a lot of that, especially for like new emerging social work students, it's like the constant like in your head, do I even have the power? But we have the power, and just even knowing that is just so powerful and so transformative. So thank you for highlighting that. And Cecily, I see your hand raised, so.
Thank you. So I don't know, there's so much that I could say to, anything that came up earlier, but I just want to, Andrea, thank you for what you shared. And every time you always drop gems, but seriously, like so many gems came out of tonight. And I really think, this idea of collective, it is in the collective, right? And this is the collective. This is the collective. I just want to highlight that. I've highlighted that before. This is the collective, that we are creating something new. So that's what excites me, even when I do get discouraged and I feel, like, when is there ever going to be any change? And is there ever going to be any change? The other piece is that we have to heal ourselves. I'm just putting a plug in for next Tuesday. I'm personally excited for having these healing centered spaces. They're so important because our energy towards fighting, and I'm going to leave with a quote that I just read, and it fits very well with Audre Lorde that Andrea just highlighted. The energy that we spend fighting, we have to make sure that we are replenishing ourselves, and we cannot show up for this fight if we're not well within ourselves. And also, I want to move away from this like fight model and really like transform. Let's liberate, let's transform. And I'm going to leave with this quote: radical change does not happen by trying to fight against or fix a flawed model. It comes from creating a new system that makes the old one obsolete. I literally just saw that. So I just wanted to leave that here. I don't even know who wrote it, but once I find out, but I just wanted to leave that because for me, this is kind of where I am with this, is like, I'm tired of fighting. And honestly, and I want to say something for our white colleagues on this call, and in general, this came up before earlier in the conversation about allies. We need allies. We really, really need allies, because I am tired, and I'm sick of it always being that it has to be on us as BIPOCs to make change. This change is not going to happen unless we have allies. So there is work that, if you're white, if you have white privilege, there's work that you need to do. And if you're serious about this, please, like, do this work, because I'm tired. And I'm tired of having these conversations, and always it's the onus is on, BIPOC people. No. So I just wanted to leave you with that. And come next Tuesday, healing centered spaces. I need it. Yeah.
Thank you, Cecily, for those closing remarks and like that quote. If you don't mind and you can, please put it in the chat because I was trying to write it and I'm sure other folks are trying to write it at the same time. And I loved it from when you said it. So yeah, we'll start to wind down. I don't see any other hands raised. If folks do want to.
Oh, Afsha, Dawn has
Oh,
her.
I'm sorry, Dawn. Yes, I see. Okay.
All right, just very quickly. I want us to realize as BIPOC people, how many people when you went to social work school, did you say you wanted to build your own agency? Did you say you wanted to uplift your own community in different ways? And we go to school and we get caught up in the regular humdrum things in life. But what I want to say is that we can build for ourselves. We can organize. We can really, we don't have to feel like we just have to work for their agencies. Because it doesn't matter. I graduated from social work school in 1997. And the same sugar honey iced tea is happening today. The same thing. And someone was saying it's going in reverse. The elders in communities of color, they see that the work that they've done is going back. We're going back in time. And so we need to start thinking in new ways. We have to start thinking, how can we build together? And for white people who are like-minded, who are really in tune with what's going on in BIPOC communities, then you can partner with us, but we will lead the way. So maybe at the next meeting or September or what have you, I just think it's important for us to start thinking differently because we can build our own. We all have the skills here. We do grant writing. We know how to develop. Some people have their PhDs. Many have their LCSWs, LMSWs, MSWs. The strength is within us. Our ancestors did so much and they didn't have the degrees, as we know. When Jane Addams was here, she didn't include BIPOC social workers, but we did what we always do. We made it happen. So just start thinking about that. What is it that you would do? What would you like to do? What would you like to develop? And let's come together. This is, it's more than just us coming together for this. It could serve another interest as well. Because what I can tell you is our folks need us. They're dying in the streets. They're not eating. They're not being taken care of. They're not respected at these agencies. And so we need to change up the way we're doing things. It's on us. So just think about that. Love you all. See you at the next meeting.
Thank you so much, Dawn. I cannot think of a better way to end our day today. Just everyone who has shared, you all have said amazing, empowering, and truth. You have spoken truth. You put it out there. I'm listening, I'm hearing, I'm learning. I hope everyone else is. And seriously, thank you so much. As always, I leave this meeting with so much more energy and motivation to continue to fight the fight and really speak up and support where the support's needed. And Cecily, thank you for bringing up the healing support group that we have next week. And then we also have another one the very next day, I think, for the AAPI community as well. So check out the links that Amelia shared, and just thank you everyone for coming and joining and listening. And I cannot wait to see everyone in our next town hall as well.
You all did a phenomenal job leading the discussion. Thank you.